Hello, psychology students. Mrs. Olson here. Today's lesson is titled Anxiety Disorders. And at the end of the lesson, you will be able to, here's the learning target, apply your knowledge of anxiety disorders to real life scenarios. So here we go with the lesson. Make sure that you have a piece of paper and a writing utensil handy so that you can record notes, or you can have another window open with a word processing document and be typing your notes that way. All right, so with anxiety disorders, I first want to talk about anxiety in general before it turns into a disorder. So here we go. The definition of anxiety reads that it's a general state of dread or uneasiness a person feels in response to a real or an imagined danger. So think about how you have felt when you feel anxious. And every human being has felt anxious at one point in their life or another. So, what does that feel like to you? Is that you being nervous with sweaty, kind of shaking palms? Is there a pit at the bottom of your stomach? Does it feel sometimes like you have butterflies? Do you get red in the face? How does it feel when you are experiencing anxiety? Okay, so kind of have that in the back of your mind. And then with the definition, you want to think about anxiety as something that is very real, but it can also be something that you've conjured up, you've made up in your mind, and you're kind of dealing with the feelings, the thoughts that you have created for yourself in your own mind. So that's where that imagined danger part comes in. Okay, our next note is talking about when anxiety turns into a disorder. And so when anxiety becomes labeled as a disorder, it's when those feelings, that fear, is disproportionate to what is actually causing the person to feel those feelings of anxiety. So the fear, it outweighs the actual danger or the relation that is involved in making the person feel that way. So this graphic represents anxiety, the behavior that we see on the outside, in the feelings that someone might feel on the inside. Now, before we go to the next slide, I want to note that anxiety is a normal stress reaction. It actually helps us to focus on that thing, that fear, those feelings that are causing us to think and behave in that state of anxiety. Okay? It's when it becomes irrational that it becomes disabling. And that's when we get into the disorders, which is where we are going next. So, anxiety disorders are the most common type of mental illness. Sometimes people will describe that they have inadequate feelings, so they don't feel like they're good enough for something or someone. They often avoid dealing with their problems of anxiety. They will have unrealistic self-images. They are unable to free themselves of these recurring worries, and that's why they have the disorder, is because they can't separate their real, actual lives from the fear or the behavior, the feelings of anxiety. Okay? Manifestations, physical manifestations of anxiety. You might see them have mood swings. They could experience headaches, sweating, muscle tightness, weakness, and fatigue. Okay. Oh, let me move me out of the way so you can see that a little bit. And so this is just a little graphic with a person stuck in the middle of this bottle of anxiety. And it says, I want my mind to be clear again. And obviously, since they're kind of stuck in this bottle, they don't have that clear mind that they're hoping for. Okay. More stuff and anxiety. Now, people that are labeled with anxiety disorders, sometimes they have difficulty forming stable relationships. And if you think about that, the reason being is due to the fact that they're always turned inward. They're constantly focused on the anxiety, those feelings. And so it's hard if you're constantly turned inward to give yourself over to someone else. And when you have a stable relationship, there is equal of giving and taking in that relationship. So if you're always focused inward, then you're kind of taking from that other person that you should be equal of giving with. Okay. People that have anxiety disorders, they often refuse to give up those behaviors in favor of focusing on the symptoms or the feelings. So, since they're constantly focused inward, they are used to that. They are used to focusing on those feelings, and it feels foreign. It feels strange to them to focus on other things other than the way that they feel with that anxiety in their lives. Okay. All right. So the first one, the first disorder that we are going to talk about is called generalized anxiety disorder. Now, the definition of generalized anxiety disorder is it's a reaction to vague or imagined dangers, and they are unable to make decisions or enjoy life. Okay, so I've got a little phrase here in a minute that will help us to remember generalized anxiety disorder. It doesn't really have a fancy name except for generalized. So these people, they're trapped in this cycle. They have trouble dealing with family and friends. They have trouble fulfilling responsibility, and this only adds to the anxiety. So this trapped in the cycle thing means that they have these anxious kind of feelings. Therefore, they don't have these stable relationships, but they do have family and friends. They worry that they're not paying enough attention to their family or friends. They're not giving their family or friends what they need. Perhaps they don't fulfill their responsibilities at work. They don't perform the way that they want to at work. And so all of this worrying about not doing what they're supposed to do, not making other people happy, not giving enough of themselves, that it goes around and around in a circle. And so those worries just cause them to worry more. So they're trapped in this worry cycle. Okay? So they worry about what causes them to worry. So they worry and worry and worry. The physical symptoms. Let's move this again. Physical symptoms could include muscular tension, an inability to relax. It's hard to relax if you're constantly worried. They have poor appetites, indigestion, diarrhea, and maybe they go to the bathroom a lot because they are just these worry warts. Okay, so here's a graphic that helps us to understand that cyclical effect, that trapped in a cycle thing that was on the other page. So they have the anxiety, then they worry about it, they might even panic. It puts them maybe into a depression, that gives them more anxiety, and so this thing, it goes around and around and around. Now, anxiety disorders or generalized anxiety disorders, excuse me, is diagnosed after 6 months of someone experiencing these problems. Okay, so we are going to go on to phobic disorders in just a moment, but I do want to give you a statistic and that generalized anxiety disorder, I'll go back for just a minute. Generalized anxiety disorder is diagnosed with Americans in the American population. 6.8 million people are in a given year diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. Okay. And within that 6.8 million, there is a group of people that is diagnosed with it twice as much as another portion of the population. So think for a second, maybe even shout out your guesses. Women are diagnosed twice as much as men within that $6.8 million statistic with generalized anxiety disorder. Okay, so that is going to end video lesson number 1 on anxiety disorders.